Hello, my name is Rudolph Stewart. I've decided to shoot a series of videos about living and traveling in Oman. This is the first video I've ever done, so it'll be a learning experience for me as I go through this video and others, and hopefully the quality will improve in future videos. I've been living in Oman for about 2.5 years. And prior to moving here, I had lots of questions about what life would be like here, and I found it quite difficult to find a lot of information about it. That's what inspired me to make this video, or this series of videos, because I've been here now for a bit, I've had a little bit of experience, and so I feel like I can tell other people about what to expect if they come here, whether as a tourist or as an expat working for one of the local companies. The overall idea is really just to give you an idea of what life is like here, what it's like to travel here, things to think about before you come, so that maybe you can avoid some of the mistakes that I've made. We are on the eastern edge of the Arabian Peninsula. We're surrounded from the east by the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. To the northwest, going south, we have the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. Then below that we have Saudi Arabia, and then to the south is Yemen. Other neighbors, if you go across the seas, would be Iran to the north. Then further south is Pakistan, and then below that is India. Having said that Oman is on the Arabian Peninsula, you probably are imagining what you think the landscape would be like. You'd probably be somewhat correct, but then also you'd probably be surprised as well. There are deserts, as you would expect in Arabia. Especially in the center of the country, there is a lot of desert. And then as you go towards the coast, you'll find lots of mountains, and we are surrounded really by coastline. And so therefore, obviously, as you'd expect, we have lots of beaches as well. Temperature-wise, there's, I guess I would say, two seasons here, winter and summer. Winter season probably starts around November and goes until March. Maybe sometimes you could dip into October, and maybe it might go into April with some cooler weather. But those are the key winter months. During the winter, it's absolutely gorgeous here. The weather is fantastic. We're talking about 10 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. In the summer months, it's a completely different story, and there we're talking about 30 to 50 degrees, actually probably closer to 35 to 50 degree weather, which is about 85 to about 120 Fahrenheit. Oman is part of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which consists of 6 countries. So aside from Oman, there is Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates. Members of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, work very closely together, and people that live in these countries are normally able to move and travel amongst each other and work as well without visas quite easily. At the moment, there are some issues with Qatar and some of the countries within the GCC, but that's not an issue for Oman. Oman is a very politically neutral country and gets along well with the neighbors in the region and actually really around the world. They're seen as kind of a peacemaker and a country that is good at putting heads together to solve political issues. So from that perspective, Oman is a good place to visit and to live because it's quite peaceful, quite safe, and you'll have a high quality of living. Some of the major cities in Oman are the capital, Muscat. The second city and second largest city is Salalah, and also Sohar is also another major city and a big port in Oman. 2 other cities I would mention would be Nizwa, which is the old capital of Muscat, and that's in the interior, and also Sur, which is also another coastal city. Population-wise, Oman has about 5 million people. It's about 60% local Omanis and about 40% are expatriate workers. Now, unlike other countries like in Europe or in the US, it's very difficult to get Omani citizenship. So even the expatriates who have lived here for 40, 50 years, they still do not by and large have Omani citizenship and will most likely have to return to their home countries when they are ready to retire. Countries where you'll find a lot of expatriates here are primarily the Indian subcontinent, so that is Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and also I would say the Philippines. From my estimation, just from visual inspection, I would say those groups, the Philippines, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, probably make up about 80–90% of the expatriate population. The rest is a smattering of people from the US, the UK, Australia, South Africa, and other Middle Eastern countries like Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. If you plan to come to Oman, unless you're from one of the GCC countries, as I mentioned, you'll likely need a visa. Rules change on a regular basis, so I encourage you to check with your local embassy if you have one, or also have a look on the Royal Oman Police website because they're responsible for visas. They're referred to as the ROP. As a Middle Eastern country, Oman has a big dependence on oil and gas. Within the center of the country, in the desert areas, there is a lot of drilling for oil and gas, but the country's trying to diversify the economy and develop new industries. At the moment, there's a desire to move away into other industries, such as agriculture and fisheries, energy and mining, manufacturing, tourism. So the economy should be diversifying and developing in the next few decades. In terms of jobs in Oman, most people that I see in terms of expatriates, they tend to work in oil and gas type fields. There's also a lot of work in the service sector, which would be the hotel sector, restaurant, and also retail. From people that I've met, I would say a lot of people tend to work in the financial type roles. Also, the medical profession seems to be very heavily dependent on expatriates, so lots of doctors and nurses seem to come from that area. One thing to keep in mind is what's called Omanization. That's a program where the government is trying to develop the local labor force to rely less on expatriate workers. So companies have targets in terms of Omanization percentages that they need to hit. The country is making an effort to develop job opportunities for local citizens, so therefore there is a big push to increase the hiring of local workers and rely less on expatriates. Due to these Omanization targets, it's getting more and more difficult for expatriates to find jobs in Oman. I've heard lots of anecdotes about people who've been here for 10, 20 years, and at the end of their contract, it's not being renewed, and therefore they have to return to their country of origin. One thing to note is if you do work in Oman, usually you have a contract. The contract is usually limited to 1 year or 2 years. At the moment, the longest a contract can be is for 2 years. And therefore, every 2 years they have to be renewed, or every year, depending on the length of your contract. I have heard stories about people who've been here for 5, 10, 15 years or more, who at the end of their contracts, they're not being renewed. In addition, the government is also implementing procedures to get people to retire at the end of a certain period in order to provide more opportunities for people to get jobs and develop their careers. So it's not just expats who are finding it more and more difficult to stay in jobs. People who are experienced and have been around for a while are also finding that in some instances they're being forced to take retirement earlier than they would like. Well, that's all I've got for today on Oman. This is just an overview, and my plan is to come back with more videos where I can talk more in depth about the topics we've discussed here, and also do some discussions around places to travel and things to do in Oman. I hope you'll join me in those future videos.